Silence can feel uncomfortable at first, especially when you're used to motion, reassurance, and reaction. But if you've gone quiet and now feel unsure, restless, or slightly off balance, understand this: nothing has gone wrong. This isn't weakness, and it's not confusion in the way you've been taught to fear. When the noise disappears, you're no longer being told who to be, how to feel, or what to chase. And in that space, uncertainty shows up not to shake you, but to reveal what's real beneath the habits and expectations. In this video, we're going to break down what's actually happening during this phase of silence, and why it so often becomes the starting point of a deeper, unshakable kind of strength. If this speaks to where you are right now, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's begin. Number 1. Silence breaks the old cycle. When silence begins, the old rhythm collapses. No messages, no reactions, no emotional back and forth. And at first, that collapse can feel unsettling. You're so used to movement, checking your phone, replaying conversations in your head, wondering what the next signal will be, that when everything goes quiet, your mind starts looking for something to grab onto. That's where the uncertainty creeps in. But here's what most people miss. This silence didn't appear to punish you. It appeared to interrupt a pattern that was running you on autopilot. Think about how the old cycle worked. Something happened. You reacted. She pulled back. You leaned in. She went quiet. You tried to fix the tension. Every emotional shift triggered a response from you, almost automatically. You weren't choosing anymore. You were responding. Silence breaks that loop. It removes the trigger. And without the trigger, the habit loses its power. Epictetus once compared life to a game of dice. You don't choose the roll, only how you play it. Silence is the moment you stop blaming the dice and start noticing your hand. For the first time in a long while, nothing is forcing you to move. No text demanding an answer. No emotional pressure asking for reassurance. Just space. And space reveals things that constant motion hides. This is why silence often feels uncomfortable before it feels clear. When you're no longer reacting, your mind suddenly has room to observe. You begin to notice how often you were compromising your own peace just to keep things moving. You see where you were explaining yourself too much, waiting too eagerly, or tolerating uncertainty because at least it felt familiar. Silence doesn't create these realizations. It exposes them. And that's why this phase can feel confusing. You're not lost. You're simply no longer being pulled by the same invisible strings. Autopilot has shut off. Now you're aware of your thoughts instead of being dragged by them. That awareness can feel like doubt at first, because you're not used to choosing consciously. You're used to momentum choosing for you. Here's an example many men recognize. Before silence, your day might revolve around anticipation, waiting to hear back, checking for signs, interpreting tone. Even when things were uncertain, there was still emotional motion. Silence removes that stimulation, and without it, your nervous system has to recalibrate. That doesn't mean you made the wrong move. It means your system is learning a new rhythm, one that isn't built around reaction. Stoicism teaches that freedom begins when you separate what happens from how you respond. Silence is that separation made real. You're no longer inside the cycle. You're standing outside it, watching it clearly for the first time. This isn't confusion. It's the end of autopilot. And once autopilot ends, real choice finally becomes possible. As this starts to settle in, it's worth pausing for a moment instead of rushing ahead. What you're experiencing right now isn't something to solve. It's something to notice. The discomfort, the quiet, the awareness. All of it is part of the shift from reaction to control. Let this land before we go further, because the next part builds directly on this awareness. If this resonates with you, take a second to like the video so it reaches others who need it too. And if you feel inclined, leave a comment sharing what silence has been revealing to you, or simply type, "I choose awareness over autopilot" in the comments. Sometimes, naming the shift is how you anchor it. Number 2. Uncertainty comes from letting go. Explaining creates control. Silence removes it. And that's exactly why uncertainty shows up the moment you stop trying to clarify yourself. For a long time, explanation was your anchor. When something felt off, you explained your intentions. When there was tension, you explained your feelings. When you sensed distance, you explained your position, hoping clarity would stabilize the situation. Explanation wasn't just communication, it was a way to manage outcomes. And when you let that go, the illusion of control goes with it. This is where many men start doubting themselves. The mind says, if I don't explain, things might be misunderstood. And that's true. But here's the deeper truth. Needing to be understood is often the hidden leash that keeps you emotionally dependent. Marcus Aurelius warned that a man who needs to be approved or interpreted correctly by others hands his peace over to external minds. The moment you stop clarifying yourself, your identity is no longer being mirrored back to you, and that absence feels unsettling. Think about how often you used feedback to know who you were. A response confirmed your value. A reply validated your intention. A conversation reassured you that you still mattered. When silence enters, that reflection disappears. There's no immediate reaction to bounce off of, no emotional echo to reassure you that you're doing the right thing. And without that reflection, uncertainty appears, not because you're wrong, but because you're standing on your own for the first time. This discomfort is often misinterpreted as danger. The mind panics and says, I should say something. I should explain before it's too late. But Stoicism reminds us that discomfort is not a signal to act. It's often a signal that growth is taking place. Independence doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels empty, quiet, and unfamiliar. The ego prefers clarity that comes from others because it feels safer than clarity that comes from within. Here's a simple example. Imagine you've gone silent and someone misreads your absence. Before, you would rush to correct the narrative. Now, you don't, and that restraint creates tension inside you. Not because you're being harmed, but because you're no longer managing how you're perceived. You're allowing reality to unfold without interference. That's a radical shift. When you stop explaining, you remove the need to be constantly aligned with someone else's expectations. You're no longer adjusting your identity to fit their understanding. And in that space, something new begins to form a self-image that isn't dependent on being seen, validated, or agreed with. So if uncertainty has followed your silence, don't rush to escape it. That uncertainty isn't a sign you're losing yourself. It's the feeling of stepping out from under the spotlight and learning who you are without an audience. Independence doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, disguised as doubt, until one day, you realize you no longer need to explain yourself to feel whole. Number 3. Calm feels unfamiliar at first. Calm feels strange when chaos was familiar. If your emotional life has been built around intensity, uncertainty, anticipation, highs and lows, then stillness won't feel peaceful right away. It will feel wrong, quiet, almost empty. And that's often the moment men start questioning themselves. Why don't I feel relieved? Why does this calm feel uncomfortable? The answer is simple, but not obvious. Your nervous system is adjusting to a new environment. For a long time, emotional turbulence gave your system something to track. Messages, shifts in tone, distance, closeness. These fluctuations kept your attention engaged. Even stress had a rhythm. When that turbulence disappears, your body doesn't instantly relax. Instead, it looks for the next signal. And when none comes, it interprets the absence as uncertainty. Not because something is wrong, but because it hasn't learned this rhythm yet. The Stoics understood this deeply. They trained soldiers to stand still before battle, not to relax, but to steady their breath. Stillness wasn't comfort, it was preparation. By standing calm before chaos, the body learned control instead of panic. Your silence is creating the same effect. Without emotional spikes, your system is learning how to exist without constant stimulation. That learning phase can feel unsettling. This is why calm is often mistaken for emptiness. When you remove drama, urgency, and emotional noise, there's suddenly space, and space can feel hollow if you've never spent time there. You're not missing something, you're no longer being flooded by it. The absence of intensity doesn't mean the absence of meaning. It means your baseline is resetting. Think about someone who's lived in a noisy city their entire life. When they first experience true quiet, it can feel uncomfortable. The silence rings louder than the noise ever did. But over time, the body adjusts. What once felt eerie becomes grounding. Emotional calm works the same way. Another reason calm feels unfamiliar is because you're no longer emotionally rehearsing outcomes. Before, your mind might constantly prepare for conversations that never happened. Now, without that mental rehearsal, there's nothing to brace for. Your system doesn't know what to anticipate, and so it waits. That waiting can feel like unease, but it's actually stabilization in progress. Stoicism teaches that inner order comes before external peace. You don't feel calm because things are resolved. You feel calm because you've stopped resisting the present moment. And when resistance ends, the body doesn't celebrate, it recalibrates. So if your silence has brought a calm that feels oddly flat or unfamiliar, don't label it as emptiness. What you're experiencing is your system learning a new state, one that isn't driven by emotional turbulence. Calm doesn't rush in like relief. It settles slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you're no longer bracing for impact. That's not loss. That's stabilization taking root. As you sit with this, don't rush to label what you're feeling or push it away. This uneasy calm is worth noticing because it's showing you where your old patterns used to live. Take a moment to reflect on how often intensity once felt like connection and how unfamiliar peace can challenge your sense of self. If any part of this resonates, leave a comment and share what this calm has been bringing up for you: confusion, relief, or something in between. Awareness is the bridge between who you were reacting as and who you're becoming by choice. Number 4. Silence reveals the truth. Without distraction, you meet your thoughts unfiltered, and that meeting can be confronting. When conversation stops, when notifications fade, when there's no emotional exchange to occupy your attention, the mind turns inward. This is often when men say, "I don't like how this feels." But what they're really reacting to isn't silence, it's honesty. Silence removes the buffers that once softened self-awareness. For a long time, interaction may have acted as a kind of filter. Talking things through, explaining yourself, or staying emotionally engaged gave your thoughts somewhere to go. They were processed out loud or projected onto someone else. Silence takes that outlet away. Now, your thoughts stay with you, unedited, uninterrupted, and that's where truth begins to surface. Seneca wrote that solitude reveals the truth of a man's character, because there is no one left to impress. When no one is watching, reacting, or responding, performance loses its purpose. You're not shaping your words for effect. You're not adjusting your emotions to maintain connection. There's no role to play. What remains is raw self-awareness, and that can be uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. This is often the point where men realize how much of their energy was spent maintaining an image, being understanding, being available, being the one who holds things together. Silence exposes the cost of that role. You start to notice where you were bending, minimizing your needs, or avoiding uncomfortable truths just to keep things smooth. Not because you were weak, but because you were trying to be agreeable. Silence doesn't accuse you of this, it simply shows you, and seeing clearly can feel heavy at first. You may notice thoughts like, "Why did I tolerate that? Why didn't I speak up sooner? Why did I keep explaining myself?" These questions aren't meant to shame you. They're signs that awareness is sharpening. What makes this stage challenging is that there's no distraction to escape into. You can't scroll past the discomfort. You can't talk it away. You have to sit with it. And sitting with it builds a different kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need immediate relief. Stoicism teaches that truth is not always pleasant, but it is always useful. Silence creates the conditions for that truth to appear. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. You begin to separate what you actually felt from what you told yourself you should feel. You see where you acted out of fear rather than alignment. And once seen, those patterns lose their grip. This meeting with yourself isn't comfortable, but it's honest. And honesty is the foundation of clarity. You can't change what you won't look at. Silence makes looking unavoidable. And in that unavoidable moment, growth begins. Not through noise, but through quiet recognition of who you are when no one is there to reflect you back. Number 5. Weakness before strength. Letting go feels like collapse at first. When you release something that once gave you direction, identity, or emotional grounding, the body doesn't interpret it as freedom. It interprets it as loss. That's why this phase often feels like weakness. Your routines shift. Your sense of certainty fades. The familiar anchors are gone, and without them, you may feel exposed, unsteady, or smaller than you were before. But this sensation isn't proof that you're failing. It's proof that attachment has loosened. Most people misunderstand strength because they associate it with holding on, enduring, maintaining, pushing through. But there's another kind of strength that only appears when holding on is no longer possible. When you stop clinging, you don't immediately feel empowered, you feel empty. And emptiness is often mistaken for collapse. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, didn't arrive at philosophy through comfort or success. He lost everything in a shipwreck. His wealth, his security, his former life gone in a moment. To the outside world, it looked like ruin. To Zeno, it became release. With nothing left to protect, nothing left to lose, he was forced to rebuild from what remained. And what remained was character. Your current sense of weakness works the same way. It doesn't come from a lack of inner strength. It comes from the sudden absence of emotional attachments that once propped you up. Validation, anticipation, hope tied to someone else's behavior. When those attachments fall away, your system feels the drop, not because you're weaker, but because you're no longer supported by external crutches. This is why the early stage of letting go can feel destabilizing. You're standing without the scaffolding you relied on. The mind says, I should feel stronger by now. But strength doesn't arrive on schedule. It arrives after the grip loosens. There's also grief in this stage. Not always grief for the person, but for the version of yourself that was invested, trying, hoping. Letting go means accepting that effort didn't lead where you thought it would. That acceptance can sting. And again, the ego calls that weakness. Stoicism calls it clarity. Power returns when you stop clinging because your energy stops leaking outward. You're no longer bracing, monitoring, or adjusting yourself around someone else's reactions. That reclaimed energy doesn't explode into confidence overnight. It settles first. It stabilizes. It gathers. Think of it like standing after a long fall. You don't jump up immediately. You pause. You find your footing. And then you rise with more awareness than before. So if letting go feels like collapse right now, don't rush to label it failure. This is the space between attachment and strength. You haven't lost your power. You've stopped borrowing it from something outside yourself. And once that borrowing ends, real strength has room to return. Number 6. Validation ends. Authority begins. Validation trains you to look outward. Slowly, subtly. It teaches you to measure yourself through reactions, through responses, engagement, attention. At first, this feels harmless. Encouragement motivates. Feedback reassures. But over time, something shifts. Your sense of worth becomes conditional. It rises and falls based on how you're received. And the moment validation disappears, uncertainty rushes in, not because you've lost value, but because you've lost the mirror you were using to see yourself. Silence removes that mirror. There's no applause, no reassurance, no immediate confirmation that you matter. And this is where many men feel exposed. The mind says, if no one is reacting, am I still relevant? That question only appears because validation has been doing the work that authority should have been doing all along. Musonius Rufus taught that a man becomes free the moment his self-worth no longer requires witnesses. As long as your value depends on being seen, agreed with, or emotionally acknowledged, you remain vulnerable to absence. Silence feels threatening because it offers no feedback, but in reality, it offers something far more powerful: independence from external judgment. Authority doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask to be noticed. It doesn't need reinforcement. It exists quietly, rooted in self-trust. And silence is often the first environment where that authority can grow, because nothing is competing with it. No praise to chase, no approval to secure. Just you, standing by your own standards. This transition can feel uncomfortable because approval is familiar, while authority is not. Approval feels warm, authority feels neutral. Approval feels encouraging, authority feels steady. One reacts, the other simply exists. When validation ends, your mind may try to recreate it, imagining conversations, checking for signs, wondering if you're still being thought about. That's the habit, releasing its grip. Here's the shift that matters. When you stop looking outward for confirmation, your presence changes. You speak less, but with more weight. You move without explaining. You're no longer performing for a response. And that self-contained energy is what people recognize as authority. Not dominance, not control, but grounded certainty. Stoicism doesn't teach men to reject connection. It teaches them to stop depending on it for self-definition. Silence helps you do that naturally. Without applause, you learn to stand without an audience. Without feedback, you learn to trust your own judgment. And once that trust forms, approval becomes optional rather than necessary. This is where presence replaces approval. You're no longer asking, "Do you see me?" You're simply there, calm, grounded, unmoved by whether you're validated or not. And that shift, quiet, internal, unforced, is the beginning of true authority. Take a moment with this. When approval fades and silence replaces it, how do you define your worth? That discomfort you feel isn't weakness, it's withdrawal from a habit. You're stepping away from needing echoes to feel complete, and that's powerful. This is where you begin recognizing your own voice, even in the absence of applause. Let this land. Then share your thoughts below, or simply type, "My worth doesn't depend on being seen." Number 7. Emotional independence forms. Without reassurance, you learn regulation. This is one of the least talked about, but most important shifts that happens during silence. When reassurance disappears, the instinctive response is discomfort. You want to check in. You want confirmation that everything is okay, that you're still connected, that you haven't made a mistake. But when you don't act on that urge, something subtle begins to change inside you. You start discovering that emotions don't need to be resolved immediately to be survived. Before silence, reassurance often acted like an emotional release valve. A reply could calm anxiety. A conversation could soothe doubt. Even uncertainty felt manageable as long as you could reach outward. Silence removes that outlet. And in doing so, it forces you to learn a new skill, staying with your emotions without outsourcing their regulation. Cleanthes described discipline as the ability to remain upright while the world pulls sideways. Emotional independence works the same way. Urges will still appear, thoughts will still rise, doubt will still knock. But instead of reacting, you hold your ground. Each time you resist the urge to seek reassurance, you strengthen that inner spine. Not through force, but through repetition. This is where many men misinterpret what's happening. They think they're suppressing emotion. They worry that staying silent means bottling things up. But suppression is avoidance. Mastery is presence. You're not pushing emotions away. You're allowing them to exist without letting them dictate your behavior. That's a crucial difference. Think about an urge you've had recently. The impulse to explain yourself, to reach out, to check for signs. That urge doesn't mean you're weak. It means a habit is losing its authority. And every time you let that urge pass without acting on it, your nervous system learns something new. I can feel this and remain steady. At first, regulation feels like restraint. Over time, it feels like confidence. You realize you're no longer at the mercy of emotional spikes. You can feel longing without chasing it. You can feel uncertainty without collapsing into it. You can feel discomfort without trying to escape it. That's emotional independence forming in real time. Stoicism teaches that freedom isn't the absence of emotion. It's freedom from being ruled by it. Silence accelerates that lesson. Without external reassurance, your system begins to generate its own stability. You stop reaching outward for balance and start finding it internally. And once that shift happens, something powerful emerges. You're no longer emotionally reactive. You're responsive by choice. You don't move because you're anxious. You move because you decide. That's not emotional numbness. That's emotional strength. And it's built quietly, urge by urge, in the space that silence creates. Number 8. The urge to reach out. The urge to reach out feels urgent. It doesn't arrive calmly or politely. It shows up with pressure, a tightness in the chest, a restless mind, a sudden belief that now is the moment to act, explain, clarify, or reconnect. And the mind gives that urge a convincing story. If I don't say something now, I'll lose the chance. If I wait, things will get worse. Urgency always speaks in absolutes. That's what makes it so persuasive. But Epictetus warned that urgency often disguises fear. Not obvious fear, but the quieter kind. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of losing control over the narrative. Silence exposes that fear because it removes the distraction of action. You can't mask anxiety with movement. You have to feel it. This is why the urge intensifies during silence. When there's no interaction, fear has nowhere to hide. And instead of recognizing it as fear, the mind reframes it as necessity. This isn't anxiety, it says. This is intuition. This is timing. This is me being mature. But when you look closely, the urge isn't coming from clarity, it's coming from discomfort. Here's the crucial part most men miss. The urge itself is the training. The moment you feel compelled to reach out, you're standing at a crossroads. One path offers immediate relief. The other offers long-term strength. Acting too soon ends the lesson before it finishes shaping you. You might get a response. You might feel temporary calm. But you also reinforce the habit of soothing fear through external action. Restraint, on the other hand, does something deeper. It teaches your system that urgency doesn't equal danger, that you can survive emotional pressure without collapsing into it, that nothing catastrophic happens when you don't act immediately, and that lesson changes you. Think of restraint not as denial, but as delay with purpose. You're not saying never, you're saying not from this state. Stoicism teaches that action taken under emotional compulsion rarely leads to wisdom. Silence creates a buffer between impulse and decision. That buffer is where character forms. Each time you sit with the urge and choose not to act, you're carving a new response pattern. Fear rises and you remain steady. Anxiety knocks and you don't open the door. Over time, the urgency loses its grip. Not because you suppressed it, but because you proved you don't need to obey it. This is why restraint is the training ground of character. You don't build discipline when things are calm. You build it when pressure is present, and you choose composure anyway. Silence gives you that pressure cleanly, honestly, without distraction. And if you let the lesson finish, you don't just get through the urge, you outgrow it. Number 9. You're repositioning, not waiting. Waiting implies passivity. This isn't that. When people hear silence, they often imagine someone sitting still, hoping, checking the clock, counting days. That image carries weakness. It suggests dependence on an outcome you can't control. But what you're doing now is fundamentally different. You're not waiting for something to happen. You're repositioning yourself so that whatever happens next no longer defines you. The confusion comes from the outside. To others, silence looks like inaction. Internally, though, it's a shift in orientation. Your attention moves inward. Your energy stops projecting outward. And instead of being pulled by anticipation, you're regaining balance. That's not passivity. That's recalibration. Stoic generals understood this distinction well. They knew when to advance and when to retreat. But retreat wasn't surrender. It was a strategic move to regain formation, strengthen lines, and restore order. A scattered army doesn't fight well. An emotionally scattered man doesn't live well either. Silence is that regrouping moment. You step back, not because you're unsure, but because you're refusing to move from a compromised position. Before silence, much of your energy may have been forward-leaning, hoping, interpreting, reacting. That constant outward focus leaves you off balance. Silence pulls that energy inward. You begin to stand upright again, emotionally centered, less reactive, more aware. And once balance returns, your choices become cleaner. This is why silence often feels productive even when nothing is happening. You're rebuilding internal structure. You're clarifying what you will and won't tolerate. You're noticing where your attention used to leak. None of that looks dramatic from the outside, but it changes everything on the inside. Waiting says, I need something to change, so I can feel settled. Repositioning says, I'm settling myself regardless of what changes. That's a powerful distinction. One keeps you dependent, the other restores autonomy. Stoicism teaches that timing matters, but readiness matters more. Acting from imbalance leads to regret. Acting from clarity leads to alignment. Silence gives you the time and space to regain that clarity without rushing toward relief. So, if you catch yourself wondering, how long am I supposed to stay like this? Shift the question. You're not counting time, you're restoring position. And once you're no longer leaning forward emotionally, you're no longer vulnerable to being pulled off course. This is strategy, not delay. You're not standing still, you're standing correctly. And from that position, whatever move you choose next will come from strength, not urgency. As you move forward from this, take a moment to notice what's actually shifting inside you. If silence no longer feels like waiting, but like standing more firmly in yourself, that's not accidental, it's alignment forming. Reflect on where your energy used to lean outward and where it's beginning to settle now. This pause isn't about time passing, it's about position changing. If this resonates, sit with it for a moment and let it clarify what you're no longer willing to move from. Number 10. This phase shapes you. Whether she returns or disappears, the outcome is secondary. That idea can be hard to accept at first, especially if your mind is still tracking possibilities. What if she reaches out? What if she doesn't? What if this silence changes everything? The mind naturally wants resolution. It wants a clear ending. But this phase isn't about securing a particular result. It's about revealing who you become when the outcome is no longer under your control. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man should measure his life not by results, but by alignment with principle. Results fluctuate. They depend on other people, timing, circumstance. Principles, on the other hand, belong to you. Silence places you in a situation where that distinction becomes unavoidable. There's no immediate reward for patience, no guarantee that restraint will be noticed, no promise that holding your ground will be validated. And that's precisely why this phase is so formative. When discomfort appears, you're faced with a quiet choice. Do you abandon yourself for relief, or do you stand firm for growth? Relief is tempting because it's immediate. A message sent, a tension eased, a question answered. Growth, however, is slower. It asks you to tolerate uncertainty without escaping it. And every time you choose growth over relief, something inside you strengthens. This is where many men unknowingly define themselves. Not in big, dramatic moments, but in these silent stretches where no one is watching. Do you act in alignment with your values, or do you bend them to soothe anxiety? Do you respect your own boundaries, or do you override them to feel momentarily safe? Silence makes these questions unavoidable. What's important to understand is that this phase is neutral. It isn't rewarding you, and it isn't punishing you. It's revealing. It shows you how you respond when comfort is removed. It highlights whether your sense of self is stable or reactive, and once seen, that truth can't be unseen. Stoicism teaches that refinement happens through pressure, not ease. Just as fire tempers steel, uncertainty tempers character. You're being shaped not by what happens next, but by how you hold yourself now. Calm or frantic, grounded or impulsive, aligned or reactive. So, instead of asking, "Will this work out?" ask a better question. Who am I becoming in this space? Because long after the outcome resolves, whatever it may be, the version of you that emerges from this phase remains. This silence isn't here to break you. It's here to refine you. And refinement doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it leaves you stronger, steadier, and more aligned than you were before, regardless of what or who returns. What you've just walked through isn't a waiting period, a test from someone else, or a pause in your life. It's a recalibration. Silence stripped away noise, reaction, and borrowed certainty, and in doing so, it showed you where your real footing is. You didn't lose momentum here. You found your center. The uncertainty, the restlessness, the quiet discomfort, they weren't signs of weakness. They were signs that something deeper was forming beneath the surface. This phase didn't arrive to give you answers about someone else. It arrived to shape who you become when no one is guiding, validating, or reacting to you. And that version of you, the one built in silence, is the one that lasts. If this resonated with where you are right now, take a moment to like the video. It helps this message reach men who need it. Leave a comment and share what this phase has been teaching you, or simply type a sentence that stood out to you. And when you're ready, watch the recommended videos on screen next. They'll help you go even deeper into this shift and what comes after silence.